brass versus steel, grosgrain ribbon versus braided string, 10 strand, 12 strand, 16, 20, 24, 30, 42. There are so many options when it comes to snare wires. And if you talk to anyone who's even remotely passionate about this stuff, they will happily share with you what their favorite is. They may even label it as the best. But time and time again, I see something that just about negates these choices altogether. From professional drummers to drum techs, drum builders, to even the companies making the snare wires themselves. Hyperbolic statements of superlative design and superior performance in a scenario that reminds me of the Emperor's New Clothes. I'm embarrassed for them when I see what they've missed. They've got their wires set up wrong. And if you're struggling with your snare sound, then there's a good chance that this could be a contributing factor. But you don't have to be a victim to this. I'm going to show you some of the most common mistakes I see, things to be on the lookout for in general, and the best practices for setting up your wires to get the sounds that you want. I can't tell you how many times I've been sent a snare drum with the wires installed incorrectly. I see this in shops all the time too, and on Instagram posts, and on product pages. I'm not sure who's setting up all of these snare wires, but it feels like there's been some institutional knowledge that's just been lost. So let's get into the most common issues, starting with the first. The Pure Sound Custom Pro snare wires. These are awesome, but they are often set up incorrectly. In fact, 9 times out of 10, and I'm not even exaggerating here, the Custom Pro wires that I see are installed incorrectly. They often have the cotter pin placed incorrectly, or they're using some sort of a hybrid kind of combination of the straps, but then maybe some strings, but then they're not mounted correctly, so that you end up with issues that are created by the mounting system themselves. It's a real mess, and it's really something that can be remedied simply by using them as they're intended. It would be awesome if you could use this system with all the different snare wires out there, but the fact is that unless they have the plates that were designed for the use with the Custom Pro, the end plates themselves, then you're going to run into more issues just by using those straps and the cotter pins. And when I see people complaining about the Custom Pro wires, often that they come out in the middle of a performance or something like that, it tends to be because they've got the cotter pin placed at the end loop rather than between those 2 stitch marks that actually keep it in the plate. The next issue is something that I see afflicting all different types of wires, not just the Custom Pros, and that is a crooked wire setup. Crooked wires result in asymmetrical response. Not sure what that means? Some of your wires will be tight, perhaps even too tight, and others will be too loose. This happens to damaged wires as well, but the most common culprit tends to be with the mounting itself. We'll get into that in just a moment, but the most important thing you can do to check this is to flip your snare drum over, particularly when you're setting up or if you've just made some adjustments, and double check to make sure that the wires are as you expect them to be, confirming the alignment and ensuring that the end plates are parallel to the snare gate. By the way, if you enjoy Sounds Like a Drum and you want to help influence the future of this series, as well as just make it possible for us to continue to produce these videos, please consider joining our Patreon as a paying member. We're going to be taking a fresh approach to things over there over the coming months and would love to share with you what we have in store. In addition, we have years of bonus material over there that you can watch entirely ad-free. Visit the link in the description below to learn more about our Patreon. The next issue, and something that I hinted at previously, is poorly mounted wires. There's quite the range of options out there for mounting snare wires, and the best one for you can sometimes be more objective than subjective. Regardless of your chosen method, there are some key setup elements to double check. Symmetry is your friend. If you're using string, check to make sure that you have equal amounts of length on both ends. The issue with varied lengths of string on either end often ends up resulting in making adjustments, feeling like you're balancing things out without really understanding how you're affecting the wires themselves. Unfortunately, this tends to make them a little crooked or just bend them overall. If you're using straps or ribbon of some sort, again, similar situation. Check the alignment because that's key. The last issue that I see relatively frequently is the wires being off center. This issue can result in a lot of unwanted and often uncontrollable additional snare buzz. It makes sense. You mount the snare wires, the drum flipped upside down, tension removed, maybe the wire is entirely disengaged. Then you flip it back over, dial in the tension, turn the wires on, and you've slipped them past the center mark, so now they may even be riding up over the bearing edge. If the end plates are actually sitting over top of the bearing edge, this can create some serious problems. But even if the end plates aren't quite encroaching and you're still set up with the wires off center, you can run into some real problems when it comes to controlling overtones and dealing with some of that unwanted snare response. The simple way around this is when you're mounting your wires or dialing in the tension on them, double check to make sure that before you've engaged them, depending on the throw-off design, you're not getting them dead center because you're going to pull them a little bit to one side when you do engage the wires. So give yourself a little bit of extra wiggle room to work with. You may need to make adjustments from time to time. I know this is a really subtle one and it may seem like it's not making a big difference, but if you've spent any degree of time with tuning drums, you understand how seemingly small, insignificant adjustments can have a massive impact on the performance results. So again, none of these will generally appear to be overly dramatic. In fact, most people don't even pick up on them when they're staring right at the issue itself. But just because you didn't see it doesn't mean that it's not there. And when you're struggling with tuning and you're dealing with muffling because you're trying to get rid of those weird overtones or you've got that extra buzz, so you're putting tape on the wires, all sorts of other little remedies, you might not even realize that you're trying to fix a problem that you yourself created in the first place. The problem is that most of us are in a rush. We tend to not dedicate enough time to this stuff on the front end, and as a result, we end up having to put more time in fixing the problem on the back end. In just a moment here, I'll go over some best practices, just some reminders of things to keep in mind when you're mounting your wires, making adjustments to them, and just little checkup things that you can do anytime you're sitting down at your drums, just to ensure that you're getting exactly what you want. Number one, make sure that your wires are mounted as designed. There are all sorts of great hacks out there, but sometimes these hacks are created by, well, hacks. So watch out for the advice that you may see on TikTok or Instagram or even here on YouTube. Make sure it's coming from a reputable source who actually knows what they're doing. Number two, take the time to ensure that the mounting method is centered on the butt plate itself and or the throw-off side. You want to make sure that the straps or strings or ribbon or whatever you're using isn't pushed over to one side that could potentially create an issue where you start twisting the wires, getting them off center, creating other problems. And finally, number three, ensure that when the wires are engaged, they're centered on the drum. This can be a real issue, and sometimes you may find that if you have a certain set of wires and a certain drum, the wires are actually too long for that drum. We've done some interesting experiments using 13-inch wires on 14-inch drums in the past, and that can always be a solution, or you may have to search for an alternative line of wires that appropriately fits the inner diameter of your drum shell. If you invest a little bit of time on the front end double checking these things, you will save yourself a lot of headache on the back end. Thanks for watching, and as always, happy drumming.